This testimony isn't just another story. It's one of those rare journeys that changes everything you thought you knew and opens your heart to something greater. We kindly ask that you like, comment, and share our videos. Your support helps us reach more people and make a bigger impact. God bless you. My name is Sarah, and I am 38 years old. I live now in a small house in Amman, Jordan, watching the dusty streets from my window, wondering how my life changed so completely. I was once a teacher's wife in a peaceful village in northern Iraq, not far from Mosul. We had a simple life, but it was a good one. My husband Thomas taught history at the local school, and I worked as a midwife, helping mothers bring new life into the world. Our home was filled with laughter and love. We had 3 children who were the joy of our lives. Our oldest, Mary, was 14, always reading books, always dreaming of becoming a doctor. Our son Peter, 12, was full of energy and endless questions about everything he saw. And little Grace, only 8, was the sunshine of our family. She loved to sing hymns she learned at church, her small voice filling our home with joy. We lived in a village where Christians and Muslims had been neighbors for generations. Everyone knew each other's names. When someone was sick or in need, others came to help without being asked. Our church stood at the center of our lives, a place of peace, community, and worship. Every Sunday, families would gather to sing, pray, and share meals. Thomas was deeply respected, the kind of man who loved quietly but strongly. He rarely raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened. His words carried wisdom and calm. He had a special way of teaching. Even difficult lessons became stories that drew people in. His students loved him. At home, after dinner, he would gather our children and read from the Bible or tell stories about the early church. Stories of brave believers who stood firm in faith, even when life was hard. Thomas wanted our children to understand that following Jesus was not always easy, but it was always worth it. Our village was surrounded by rolling hills covered in ancient olive trees. The air smelled like fresh bread from the bakery and the flowers from gardens in every courtyard. Children played in the streets until sunset. Neighbors never locked their doors. We felt safe, protected by our remoteness and the friendship between our communities. But we were wrong. Evil was coming closer every day, and we didn't see it until it was too late. In the summer of 2014, we began to hear terrifying news. A group called ISIS was taking over towns and cities. At first, they seemed far away, something that happened to others, not to us. But then, refugees started passing through our village. Families arrived with nothing but what they could carry. Their faces were pale with fear. They told stories that sounded like nightmares. Churches burned, men killed, women taken away, children forced to deny Christ. We prayed for them. We shared our food and clothes, whatever little we had. But deep inside, fear began to grow. I started to wonder if our turn would come. Thomas and some men from our church met several times to discuss what to do. Should we leave? Should we stay? Thomas's elderly parents lived with us, and his father was too sick to travel far. Thomas believed that God wanted us to stay, to be a witness, to show that Christians do not run away when times get hard. I trusted his faith. But at night, I lay awake, listening to distant explosions, wondering if we had made the right choice. Our pastor, Father Joseph, encouraged us to remain strong in prayer. He said, "Trust that God will protect us." Every week, we held special prayer meetings at the church, asking God to spare our village and keep our families safe. But as the weeks passed, more families began to leave. Every Sunday, the church grew emptier. The children became quiet, afraid. Mary stopped wearing her cross necklace outside her shirt. She said older girls warned her that it was dangerous. One night, Peter asked me, "Mama, will ISIS come here?" I didn't know what to say. I wanted to protect my children from fear, but I also couldn't lie. That night, Thomas gathered us and read from Daniel in the lion's den. He reminded us that God could protect us, no matter what happened. Then came the night I will never forget. August 15th, 2014, the Feast of the Assumption. That morning, we had celebrated a beautiful service at church. Despite everything, I felt peace that day. But that peace shattered at midnight. We heard trucks roaring into our village. Men shouting. Dogs barking. Then, banging on our door. Before we could get out of bed, they broke it down. Men in black, with covered faces and guns, stormed into our home. They dragged us into the street in our nightclothes. I held my children close, trying to shield them. The men shouted orders, pushing everyone into lines. And then, I saw our church burning. Flames reached into the sky like angry hands. Everything we knew was ending in fire. They separated the men from the women and children. I watched as they pulled Thomas away. Our eyes met across the village square. And without words, he told me, "Be strong. Protect our children. I love you." Peter tried to run to his father, but I held him tight. If he moved, they would kill him. They lined the men against a wall, our neighbors, our pastor, our fathers. The ISIS leader stood on the church steps, fire burning behind him, and said we had to choose. Convert to Islam, pay a special tax, or leave. But even as he spoke, I knew those weren't real choices. They had already taken our homes, our freedom, our safety. If you haven't liked, comment, or share, please do. One by one, families were called forward. Some agreed to convert out of fear, especially those with small children. I couldn't judge them. Terror makes people do desperate things. But most of us said no. And when we refused, they beat us, right there, in front of everyone. When they called our family forward, my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Before I could speak, Peter stepped forward. His voice was shaking, but strong. He said, "We are Christians. We will always be Christians. Jesus is our Lord." The leader stared at him in shock, then turned to Thomas. "Did you teach your son to be stubborn?" Thomas answered, "I taught my son the truth." They beat him, with rods, with fists, until he fell. Mary screamed. Grace buried her face in my side. I could not move. I could not breathe. That was the last time I saw my husband alive. They pushed us, the women and children, into trucks. The engines roared, drowning out the cries behind us. I looked back one last time, and saw our village disappearing in smoke. We drove through the night, no idea where we were going. Some of the younger women were separated along the way. We never saw them again. When the trucks finally stopped, we were forced into a building that looked like an abandoned school. There were hundreds of women there, old, young, some with babies, all sitting on the cold floor, terrified and silent. For the first few days, they gave us almost no food. Just a little bread and dirty water. Children cried all the time. Mothers whispered prayers under their breath. I held my children close at night, whispering verses from the Psalms. It was all I could offer them, hope through words. Then, one morning, a guard came in and called out a list of names. Thomas's name was not there. Neither was Father Joseph's. A woman beside me whispered, "They've taken the men somewhere else." I asked, "Where?" She looked down and said softly, "You don't want to know." My heart sank. That night, I prayed harder than I ever had. I asked God for a miracle. I asked him to let me see my husband again, just once. 2 days later, my prayer was answered, but not in the way I hoped. They brought a group of men to the compound, bound, beaten, covered in dust. I recognized Thomas immediately, even though his face was bruised and swollen. He saw me too, and smiled, that same gentle smile I had known for years. Before I could reach him, they lined the men up outside. An ISIS officer shouted something in Arabic. Then, they shot them. I screamed until my voice broke. Peter tried to run to his father, but I held him back again, screaming, "Don't! Don't!" That moment shattered everything inside me. I felt my heart die. It was like time stopped, only the sound of gunfire and my children's cries remained. For days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak. I wanted to die. But even in that darkness, something strange began to happen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas's smile, not in pain, but in peace. And deep in my soul, I heard a whisper, "Do not give up. I am still with you." I didn't understand it then, but I would later come to know that was the voice of the one who never leaves us. Weeks passed in that place. We lost count of the days. The guards came and went, shouting orders, taking people away. Then one day, a new guard came, Omar. He was young, maybe 25, with sharp eyes and a quiet way about him. Unlike the others, he didn't shout or hit anyone. When he first saw us praying in a corner, he didn't stop us. He just watched, curious, but silent. That night, he brought extra water for the children. He didn't say why, but I knew it was out of kindness. I thanked him softly, and he looked away quickly, as if ashamed. 4 days after that, he kept his distance. But whenever he was on duty, I noticed the atmosphere changed. The other guards were less cruel, the beatings fewer. One evening, while the sun was setting, he came and sat near us. He didn't look at me directly. He just asked, "Why do you still pray?" His voice was low, almost troubled. I said, "Because prayer reminds us that God hasn't forgotten us." He frowned. "But your God let this happen to you." I looked at him and said quietly, "He didn't make this happen. People did. But even here, in this place, He's still with us." Omar didn't reply. He stood up and walked away. But after that day, I often saw him listening from a distance when we prayed or sang softly at night. Then one morning, he called me aside. I was afraid. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. But he spoke gently. He said, "You must leave this place. They are moving you to another camp tomorrow. If they do, you'll never see your children again." I froze. "What do you mean?" He looked around to be sure no one was listening, then said, "There's a small truck leaving tonight. I can help you get on it, but only if you trust me." My heart pounded. Could this be real? Was it a trap? But something in his eyes, the same quiet sorrow, told me he was telling the truth. That night, after everyone was asleep, Omar came with a flashlight. He whispered, "Now." I woke Mary, Peter, and Grace. We followed him through the back of the compound, moving silently in the dark. My hands were shaking. We climbed into a small truck covered with tarps. He handed me a small bottle of water and whispered, "This road will take you north. There are Christian families in the mountains. They will help you." I looked at him, a man I once feared, and said, "Why are you helping us?" He hesitated, then said, "Because of your prayers. I hear them every night. Your God. He listens to you. I want to believe in a God like that." Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to say so much, but there was no time. The truck started moving. As we drove away, I looked back and saw him standing there, watching us disappear into the night. We drove through the night, hidden under old blankets in the back of that truck. Every sound made me jump. Every bump in the road felt like it would throw us off. The driver never spoke. I didn't know if he was part of the plan or just following Omar's instructions. All I knew was that if they caught us, they would kill us. After several hours, the truck stopped suddenly. The driver opened the back flap and whispered, "This is where you get off." We climbed down quietly. Cold air hit our faces. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dark hills and silence. He pointed toward the north. "Go that way," he said. "You'll find others. Maybe Christians." Then he drove away, leaving us standing in the moonlight. For the next 3 days, we walked. We had no food except a few dry pieces of bread, and only 1 bottle of water. Mary carried Grace on her back most of the time, and Peter helped me gather dry twigs to make small fires at night. During the day, we hid in caves or behind rocks whenever we heard vehicles. At night, we followed the stars. Sometimes, I thought I could hear Thomas's voice telling me, "Keep going, Sarah. Don't stop." There were moments when I wanted to give up, when my feet were bleeding, and Grace cried from hunger. But each time, something inside whispered, "You're not alone." On the 4th day, as the sun began to rise, we saw a small cross carved into a stone near a stream. It was old, but it was there, a sign. I fell to my knees and began to weep. We followed the stream until we reached a small village hidden among the hills. It was a community of Christian families who had escaped just like us. They welcomed us with open arms, gave us food, clean water, and a small room to rest. That night, for the first time in months, we slept without fear. When I closed my eyes, I dreamt of light, soft, golden light surrounding me. And in that light, I heard a voice say, "You are mine. I will restore you." The families in that mountain village had little, but they shared everything. They told us that Kurdish soldiers often passed through to protect the area. It was safer than most places. Within a few weeks, we joined a group heading toward Erbil, where refugee camps were being set up. The journey was long and rough, but nothing compared to what we had survived. When we reached the camp, the Red Cross gave us tents, blankets, and food. There were thousands of people, Christians, Yazidis, even Muslims who had fled ISIS. Every night, I sat outside our tent, watching the sunset over the dusty horizon. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I prayed. Most times, I just sat in silence, trying to understand how life could change so much so quickly. One evening, a group of volunteers came to the camp. They were from different countries, America, Lebanon, and Jordan. They brought medicine and supplies, but also something else, hope. One of them, a woman named Rebecca, came to our tent and sat with me. She didn't ask many questions. She just listened. When I told her about Thomas and the night we escaped, she took my hands and said softly, "Sarah, I believe God brought you out for a reason. He has not finished your story." Her words touched something deep inside me. I hadn't thought about purpose in a long time, only survival. Over the next few months, Rebecca and the team organized small prayer gatherings in the camp. At first, I only listened quietly at the back. But one day, as they sang, I felt something break open inside me. Tears poured down my face. I lifted my hands and whispered, "Lord, I'm still here. I don't understand why, but I'm still here." In that moment, I felt his presence like a warm embrace. The same peace Thomas had in his last smile filled my heart. It was as if God himself was saying, "You are not forgotten. You are still my daughter." That night, for the first time, I forgave those who killed my husband. I whispered, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they've done." I thought forgiveness would be impossible, but in that moment, it became freedom. As months turned into years, life slowly began to rebuild. We were later moved from Erbil to Amman, Jordan, through a humanitarian program. There, we found a small church made up mostly of refugees like us. Broken people, survivors, believers who had lost everything except their faith. The pastor, a kind man named Elias, welcomed us warmly. He said, "This is a place where God turns ashes into beauty." At first, I didn't know how to serve. But soon, other women started coming to me, widows, mothers, young girls. And I realized they needed what I had once needed, someone to listen, someone to understand. So I began sharing my story. Not to talk about pain, but to talk about hope. I told them, "We lost everything that can be touched, but not the one who holds us. Even in the fire, Jesus was there. Little by little, peace returned to our family. Mary began studying again. She still wants to become a doctor. Peter helps at the church, playing guitar during worship. And Grace, she still sings those same hymns she sang as a child, but now her voice carries a deeper faith. One Sunday, as I watched them all smiling and worshiping, tears filled my eyes again. Not tears of sorrow this time, but of gratitude. I remembered Omar, the young guard who risked his life to save us. I often pray for him, that one day he will meet the God he saw in us. Because I believe, even in that darkness, a seed was planted in his heart. When I look back on everything we went through, I sometimes wonder how we survived. But then I realize, it was never our strength. It was his mercy. His hand carried us through the valley of death. His love gave us reason to keep breathing when everything else was gone. I no longer ask why me. Instead, I ask, what now, Lord? What do you want to do with this story? And every time, the answer is the same. Tell them I am real. Tell them I never leave my children. That's why I share this testimony. Not to relive the pain, but to remind whoever is listening that faith still shines in the darkest night. If you are listening now, and you are in your own night of sorrow, hold on, because I promise you, even when it feels like everything is lost, Jesus is there, whispering your name. He never wastes our tears. He never forgets our pain. And one day, he turns every wound into a testimony that can heal others. I used to think my story ended in that night of fire and blood. But now I know, that was just the beginning. Because when everything burned down, what remained was faith. And faith was enough.